Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Musical Talk. I'm Mike Shapiro. In this episode, we continue our series of chats with participants in the Hollywood Fringe Festival, which, at 10 years of age, is still very much young, scrappy, and hungry. In the last episode, we spoke with the festival's co-founder and director, Ben Hill, as well as musical theater director Janet Miller. Today, I want to share a very interesting, contrasting perspective on the same festival, this time from musical theater writer/composer/lyricist/producer Laura Wiley. Laura comes from the trenches of music performance and approaches the Fringe with an entrepreneur's eye for opportunity as well as a first-hand sense of what entertains an audience. And in her case, the answer is spirited musical parodies of pop cultural franchises, such as Game of Thrones, and one of my favorite TV shows, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. On a side note, I wear the cheese. The cheese does not wear me. My conversation with Laura went a little something like this. I'm here with Laura Wiley through the magic of voiceover IP. Laura, thank you very much for joining me today on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background as a performer and a musician, and then how you became a producer of musical theater?
Yes. So I have always been a piano player for different bands and different groups. And I was, choir accompaniment. I played for churches and temples. And not too long ago, I got into working at piano bars. And I started with Musical Mondays at this local gay bar, which kind of transitioned into working at Don't Tell Mama in West Hollywood. And West Hollywood was kind of the game changer because I had access to all these Los Angeles people, and it was a big musical theater jump for me. I started to learn way more musical theater. So I met these two guys who approached me and said, "Hey, would you like to score one of our shows?" Now, I had never done anything like this. I mean, I'd written original music, I was a singer-songwriter, but I'd never done anything like musical like that. But I tackled it. And we actually had one of the most popular shows at Fringe that year. It was called The Video Games. It was like based on the Hunger Games, this interactive with all these video game characters. And I basically pulled all of my video game knowledge to create a score that I could do live and improv with them.
Now, prior to this point, were you a fan of musical theater, or was that something you would listen to growing up?
I did grow up with musical theater, but I only grew up with the classic stuff. So there was so much that I didn't know. So I grew up with, My Fair Lady, Guys and Dolls, Hello Dolly, Singing in the Rain in our house. And I didn't know how much was all out there. And after I started Musical Mondays, I really got a first-hand education in how much is out there, because basically what Musical Mondays was, people would come in and they'd sing musical theater. So they'd put the music in front of me and I would just have to learn it on the spot. So I started learning all these musicals, and I've since then done a deep dive into musicals. I'd say I know quite a bit now.
So I'm assuming you were dealing with a lot of contemporary musicals or things that were written more recently.
Now I am, yeah. So I would say I know pretty much everything that's trending and everything people are going to ask. So those same guys that I worked with, the next year we decided we wanted to work together again, but this time I would just be a musical director for a musical. That was the idea. And we couldn't get the rights to any shows we wanted to do. So they said, "Why don't you just write one?" And I kind of laughed it off. I was like, "Okay, I'll just write a musical. That's a thing people do. Stupid." I ended up writing one. We talked about it, and he was like, "You could write a parody. Those are pretty easy to do. What's something you love?" I was like, "I don't know, Game of Thrones." And as soon as I said it, we had this whole idea. I went home, I wrote 11 songs in one night.
Wow.
From it. Felt like divine intervention. It was a lot. It was crazy.
So the prior project, the video game project, was that a parody or was that more of a tribute but an original source material?
I'd say both, because there was a lot of comedy in it, but there was also a lot of references to the games. But yeah, Winter is Coming was kind of my first real foray into musical parody. That's where I really first started learning the genre. And then the next year, I liked those guys, but I kind of wanted to do my own thing. They kind of got the ball rolling for me. So the next year, I wanted to do a show called Buffy Kills Edward, which I saw on a T-shirt. And I I asked around. I asked everyone I knew, and everybody said, "No, we don't want to be involved with that. That doesn't seem like a great idea." I was like, "Okay." So I wrote it on my own and I produced it on my own, which was very overwhelming being a producer for the first time. It's a lot of money, but I really believed in the brand. And not only did we completely sell out at Fringe, I mean, we were oversold. So not only that, but on top of that, we were able to sell the show to Australia, who now they licensed it from me and they performed the show at the Adelaide and Melbourne Fringe festivals. And we also turned it into a successful web series. So we've done a lot with that brand, and I was really happy with that.
Now, if memory serves, the Adelaide Fringe is the #2 Fringe festival in the world after Edinburgh. Is that right?
Yeah, and they actually sold out our show, which was cool. So it's now sold out on 2 continents.
So one difference between these two projects is with the Game of Thrones parody, you were working as a writer, composer, lyricist, but you were not the producer, after which point you struck it on your own and you became producer as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And how would you describe the difference between those experiences, where in one case you're the creative person and the other case you're both the creative person and the organizer responsible for the entire thing?
I mean, they're night and day difference. I really enjoyed doing the Game of Thrones musical because I pretty much just had to show up, make sure everything was running right. We did that with tracks, and I would just be in the sound booth running the cues. It was very chill. When you are a producer, you are doing everything. And I mean everything, like from the hiring to basically stage managing. Even if you hire a stage manager, I mean, no matter what you're paying them, it's not enough to get them to care about it as much as you do. So you're doing everything. It's a lot. It's a lot of work. I always tell people when they're a producer to kind of know what you're getting yourself into, because not only are you looking to spend, at least $1,000 for Fringe. I mean, most people spend anywhere from 1 to 10 grand on Fringe. So you kind of have to know the kind of money that's going into it. And then you have to try and get those seats sold. And it's a lot harder now than it used to be. So that was, I mean, in the Buffy days, at least we had Buffy and Twilight brand. So that was a pretty easy sellout, but it's not always, and you have to deal with props and costumes and the venue and rehearsal schedules and actor schedules and making sure that you're branding all over Fringe and making sure that you've got our sponsored drink and you're getting the Fringe cabaret and like all these things you have to do early. We did a promotional day at Musical Mondays, at Rage. There were so many things, and you stay busy. It took over my whole life into 2017. But it was rewarding at the end. Obviously we got nominated for awards and people loved it. We got amazing feedback, so that was great. But was it a lot of work?
I've heard producing a musical described as trying to keep an out-of-control train together while you're also laying down the track at the same time.
Yeah, that's a really good way to describe it. And everything that can go wrong will go wrong. And everything you plan to spend more.
Let me focus on some of the creative decisions you did with these parodies. When you were approaching Game of Thrones, you're obviously looking at a very large fantasy franchise, which is, among other things, not done. How do you pick a slice of that vast story to focus on for a musical that I assume is an hour to 90 minutes?
Well, what we originally decided was we were going to do just the first season. And then if that was successful, move on and do other seasons. So we were going to do it by season. So we did the first season of Game of Thrones, and we kind of tried to hit the main points. So we started from basically the beginning where you meet the Starks up until Joffrey becomes king. So we kind of just wanted to take that meat and the major events that happen in that first season. So we did that, and it was I thought it was a very successful cut of the show. We weren't able to do extra seasons because one of the things that I found was really messed up. As soon as we finished our musical, 2 other Game of Thrones musicals opened immediately after. So we weren't really able to keep our brand going and do more musicals because brands with a lot more money came up after us. I mean, one brand, God, they put like $100,000 into their show, and I just didn't have that kind of money. And they took theirs. They had a 3-month run in LA, and then they went to New York. And I saw their show, and I felt like it was a lot of money behind a product that still needed a lot of work.
I guess this is one of the dangers of working on a property where it's all unauthorized, and no one, I assume no one has the rights to do these musicals. I assume they're just, no one objects, so people go ahead with them. But it also means that you don't have exclusivity with the particular property you're working with.
Yes. Now you can, well, you used to be able to. So if you look at like the Harry Potter thing, so with Harry Potter, Star Kid was the first one to come up with a musical. So because they were the first, they basically got exclusive rights from the Harry Potter brand.
Interesting. So you're almost auditioning in a way. If you can do a good enough job, the owner of the property might step in and endorse you.
Well, good job based on their following. They went viral overnight. So the problem is, if we had gone viral, we probably could have asked for exclusive rights, but we didn't. We were a local theater production, so other people came in. I will say what was nice, I met the Game of Thrones creators recently, and they knew who we were. They knew who all the Game of Thrones musicals were.
Well, that's very
They
cool.
were just like, oh yeah, we knew about all of them. They're like, we're not going to bother anybody about the rights thing.
Now, when you're parodizing, I think that's a word. When you're parodizing Game of Thrones, are you asking the question, what if this were a musical, but trying to stick to the story, or are you trying to be wacky and perhaps point out some of the foibles of the original and being a little more free-handed with it?
Well, with that one, we were trying to really do a tribute to a brand that I love. So I was trying to make it a musical, but also pay tribute to things that I love and explore certain characters, arcs a little deeper. So, for example, one of the people that I love in Game of Thrones is Arya Stark. So we kind of did kind of a deep dive into her psyche from when she was a child, her and Sansa, and kind of their wants. We had that classic I Want song for what they wanted from their lives. We really explored, I put Tyrion as the narrator, which I love because I feel like Tyrion is kind of the brains behind the whole thing on the show. So he was fun. So it was making fun of things as well as paying tribute, if that makes sense. So like one of our songs, for example, because it's a parody after all, we had the whole Jaime and Cersei having sex scene. And we had a song called I'm in Love with My Twin Sister. And it's this big, beautiful pop ballad about like fucking this girl. It was ridiculous. But the idea was we're playing with something that's already there and just kind of adding a little bit of humor to it. You don't have to do much when the material is already there.
One approach to comedy that I've heard described in other realms is that you take something funny and you musicalize it as if the characters were taking it dead serious. Is that an approach you use, or do you wink at the audience a little bit and have a little more fun with the character interpretations?
I would say the former. The characters are taking it seriously. They're not laughing at themselves. We are laughing at them. They're not in on the joke. The only one I would say who was in on his jokes was Tyrion. The others, not so much. And I think that's funnier if they are really living the joke. So for example, we did a song called Power of the Wolf. And Robb Stark is singing about how great it is to be a Stark. And Bran's trying to be like, but I can't move my legs. And he's like, but you can do all these, you can climb mountains. He's like, I can't walk. And the joke is, that Robb Stark is completely oblivious. So if he was in on the joke, I don't think it would be as funny.
Got it. Now with the Buffy Kills Edward parody, you're obviously doing a mashup of two beloved franchises, which seems like you're taking on a double burden in terms of humor because you're trying to think of how these two things can interact and intermix. Did you find that it was harder to do a double parody as opposed to something that's fairly straight of a single franchise?
Easier. It was the easiest one I've written because it lent itself, if that makes sense. Like the comedy was there because you already have two entities that can snipe at each other. So they're kind of doing my job for me, whereas I don't have to like snipe at anyone. Buffy and Bella kind of having these square-offs. And I think what also was really, really easy about Buffy Kills Edward, for me at least, with Game of Thrones, and even when I did Sex and the City, you have these entities that people expect and these storylines that people wait for. Whereas in Buffy Kills Edward, I made up the whole thing. So I really had complete creative license because I was telling a brand new story that I was making up. So it gave me a lot more creative freedom. And I found that to be so much easier.
That makes sense. You're obviously starting with a what-if kind of premise, and therefore there's no canon that you really have to obey.
Yeah.
Judging from what I've seen on your YouTube page, it looks like you're taking an ensemble approach where perhaps you're returning to the same cast members from show to show. Is that something that you're doing?
A little bit. I don't always intend it to be the exact same people, but there's a few people that I work with that are integral to my company. So one of the girls who was in Winter is Coming, Buffy Kills Edward, and Sex and the Musical, Sherry Berg, is one of my core company members. I have basically three core company members, and she is one of them. That's why she's in all of my shows. The other one, Corey Robeson, was also in all three shows, and Amanda Hoopman has been in the last two. She joined the company during my Buffy Kills Edward era. And those are kind of my three core company members. And their job is basically to help me. I have so many things that I have to do in running this operation that I need strong, comedic, and talented minds to help me move this thing forward. And all three of them, I think, are brilliant singers, actors, comedians. So I'm very happy to have them on my team.
And speaking of ways that actors can help, are any of your shows improvised or are they strictly scripted?
So, yes and no. When we do them live, a little bit of improvisation happens just because it does, because that's theater. And it's when you do Fringe, it's not like a normal production where you get tons and tons of time to rehearse. So improvisations just naturally happen. However, when we film, it is strictly stick to script. I don't allow any improvisations when we're filming things, simply because at that point I'm solidifying the brand. But when we're live, I mean, things just happen. There's a little bit of an improvisational nature that's necessary. For example, during Sex and the Musical, we had these like fake phone props, like handheld cell phones, like the big ones from, not cell phones, cordless phones.
Right.
And we couldn't find them. So at one point, one of my actors came out with like a book on his ear. He's like, "Leave us alone, people. Like, we're doing the best we can."
I think one of the fun aspects of indie theater is that you can bond with the actors that way. And if they run into a problem and they handle it with aplomb, you enjoy that. It becomes part of the performance, seeing how they solve problems in real time.
Pretty much. I mean, we kept losing those phones. At one point, Sherry came out and she had like the whole phone receiver on her ear. I was just screaming. It was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. It was so ridiculous. I don't know why we kept losing those, but that's the thing. It's what I was talking about, like producing a show at Fringe. It's a lot. It's a lot, and things happen, and you just have to kind of roll with it.
Now, you mentioned you also did a Sex and the City parody. Is that one of the more recent productions?
Yes, that was this last year at Fringe. We did Sex and the Musical, and it was a prequel story to Sex and the City, which gave us that creative license I was talking about, but only a little bit, because I still had to like get the characters to where we know them today. And, we still had Mr. Big, and we still had like big Sex and the City tropes. So I still was boxed in a little bit to keep it to authenticity.
How do you make the decision for the musical style of a given parody? I know that Game of Thrones perhaps suggests a specific approach because the setting is of a kind of era and there's a musical style that's heavily used on the show. It seems like you have a little more free reign with some of the other properties. So how did you make those choices?
So for Buffy Kills Edward, that was obviously a rock musical. There was so much fighting in that show. So that one was very clear to me what that was going to be. Sex and the City, to me, struck dance music. And it was my first electronic musical, which was very stressful because it's not a genre I write in, but I figured it out. Game of Thrones, actually, we ended up doing 3 musical styles that had to do with the different families. So the Targaryens had kind of these like sweeping kind of like power high rock screams. They had rock belt songs. The Lannisters actually had like a burlesque style, like that kind of Bob Fosse, dun 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 dun. I just thought it was so arrogant, and they had lots of tap numbers. And then the Starks had very straightforward musical theater, very like, very like being alive. Like they were very, because they're Starks and they take themselves very seriously. So I think we did 3 genres of music for that, and that was a lot of fun playing with the different characters and what kind of music they would do.
Now, anyone who's been to your performer website can see that you're a very capable vocalist. Do you ever participate on stage in any of your shows?
I do not. So the thing is, I am not a musical theater singer, and I think because I'm a capable vocalist and vocal coach, I know my limitations. And I am actually a female tenor, which is a very strange vocal range for musical theater. Works great in pop music, actually. I mean, I nail Sam Smith and Ed Sheeran, but For musicals, it doesn't really work. There's not female parts that are like that. So unfortunately for me, no, I don't. But I think it's better for me actually to be able to kind of see it from the outside and really see my vision as opposed to worrying about being in it, if that makes sense.
Sure. Are you directing these typically?
I don't always direct them, but I have. I directed Buffy Kills Edward and I directed Sex and the Musical, but I don't always. We had somebody else direct the Game of Thrones, and we had somebody else direct my web series for Buffy. The guy that I was talking about, Corey Robeson, he directed not only the web series for Buffy Kills Edward, but also our music videos for Sex and the Musical when we did those.
Now, when you've been talking about all these productions at Fringe, you're referring to the Hollywood Fringe. And
Yeah.
a lot of our audience is very familiar with Edinburgh Fringe because here on Musical Talk, we do extensive coverage of that festival. And I'd like to give people a little taste of what Hollywood Fringe is like and how it differs from the mothership. Have you ever been to the Edinburgh Fringe?
I haven't, but I honestly don't know if I would, only because I've heard a lot about it, and it just sounds so overwhelming to me that there's like thousands of shows. Like, I feel like that would just overwhelm my senses. So one of the nice things about Hollywood, because it's only, 300-400 shows, you could potentially see like a third of them, you could see a good amount of the work. You could see all of the award winners easily. You know what I mean? That wouldn't be a difficult challenge. With the Hollywood Fringe Festival, everything is kind of close together. And there's like this really, because it's a lot smaller than Edinburgh, we have this little centralized area where we all hang out. So we all know each other and we're all friends. And there's something really nice about that. Versus, to me, I guess just my personal take, I feel like at Edinburgh, like you wouldn't know anybody. You're just trying to like navigate this massive, massive festival. It's kind of like, you know what it reminds me of? Okay, here's a perfect like comparison. We did WhedonCon last year for Buffy Kills Edward, and it was great. By the end of the convention, we got to know everybody at the convention. We really got to see all the workshops and all the people that you need to meet, and I felt like it was a really nice experience. We went to all the social events. It was great. We tried to go to LA Comic-Con, and we got so overwhelmed, we left after 2 hours. We were like, cool, this is too much. There was just so much going on. I was like, nope, no, this is terrible. I can't. Like, you couldn't even really see what's going on. There were just thousands of people, and it was just a, mayhem. And I feel like I operate better in kind of a more intimate setting. Like, at Hollywood Fringe this last year, I saw 50 shows, and I got to know kind of all the major players. Even if I didn't see their shows, I kind of knew who everybody was and what their shows were. And that's just something I just don't think you could do at a larger scale Fringe. I feel like you'd just be trying to figure out where to go next or what to do. And oh God, and have you heard about the busking, where people just stand there trying to beg you to go to their shows?
I have experienced this firsthand in
That's
Edinburgh.
a lot.
I will say that everything you said is true. It is a little overwhelming, and you're only going to be able to scratch the surface at Edinburgh. The busking is actually really fun because the buskers are very creative in how they get your attention, and they're not terribly obnoxious about it. I find it's very charming, and you can always just walk the other way if you're not into what's being offered. It's so it's an interesting scene.
I mean, everybody knew who our show was this year, and it was really cool. It was just also, it's kind of, there's a lot of pressure when everybody knows you and they know your previous work. And we all kind of know each other. It's different, and it's a lot more affordable, I've heard.
Now, even if you haven't been to Edinburgh, you have toured internationally and you have a lot of experience with different audience cultures as a performer. Would you say that the Hollywood Fringe audience has a kind of style to it or a certain personality that you try to meet?
Yes, it definitely does. I honestly wish certain things were a little bit different, as far as like people kind of want to be shocked a little bit. So I think the things that have more of that shock value, like there was one I know, and it was like only something to me that could be like at Hollywood Fringe. It was like, we need this musical to stop us from killing ourselves. Like, I feel like that was a very Hollywood style musical.
And do you find that you tailor the material of your parodies in some way to match the audience, or do you find that you can vibe what the audience is responding to, and that as you've done show after show, you've figured out how to address this particular audience's style and expectations?
We try. I mean, I'll tell you, it was very, very easy when we did video games and, the Game of Thrones, and we did the Buffy Kills Edward. It was a lot of slasher, violence, killer, and it was very exciting. Our last one was a little bit harder to sell. It was a show about females and friendship. And I think that really does speak to Fringe, and that, people like kind of a little bit of shock value. And it's because you're trying to stand out among 400 shows. Like I would say what's happening now as well is our genre is kind of getting overlooked a little bit, our genre of musicals, because what's hot now and what's shocking and exciting is immersive. So now immersive kind of runs Fringe. Those shows actually sell out before Fringe even starts usually. Like all of the immersive shows are sold out before we even start. Because who doesn't want to be part of the action? It's a very cool thing. But yes, it does make it harder when you're kind of a traditional show and you don't have anything kind of shocking to offer. Nobody dies in Sex and the City. Like nobody's going to be getting killed. We did have sex on stage, but you wouldn't know that unless you saw the show. Does that make sense? So that's...
So to the extent that you can tell me now, do you have anything planned for the Hollywood Fringe this upcoming June?
So we actually kind of decided, because, as I said before, it's been really, really hard to sell tickets lately. There was something that happened this last year that was, in my opinion, something that's going to be very bad for future Fringes, but we'll see. But what has happened is now people have started giving away their tickets for free because there's so many shows that people just want to be seen. They don't even care. They just want someone to see their show. So when you start giving it away for free, then everyone expects that and nobody wants to pay. And you're saying, well, what's the problem? Free art. The problem is that we all, well, not all, but a lot of us put a lot of money into this Fringe. A lot. So at some point we have to see that return, so we can pay our actors, pay our stage managers, pay our sound people. So we can't afford to just give it away for free. But if everyone is doing it, you're kind of obligated to do it as well. And that becomes a huge issue. So this last year we had that in spades.
So you found that a lot of people were giving up tickets, and then willingness to pay for tickets has dropped correspondingly.
Completely. We had to give away about 60% of our tickets last year. I found out other people had to give away about over half of theirs. And that's a new development. That was never really a thing in past Fringes. And like I said, I've done the last 3 before that. So usually, you made enough ticket sales to at least pay your actors, at least kind of get some of your investment back. Because that's the point of the ticket sales, is to make up for how much you had to spend to do this thing. And if that's taken away, how are you going to afford to do it?
It's definitely a concern, and there's certainly a balance to be struck between trying to monetize your production and draw in an audience. And all the shows are competing for an audience, so it's a tough balance to strike.
Yeah. So for us this year, actually, we are not doing a show. However, we are going to be giving away an award. Because for me, like I said, I think one of the saddest things is everybody's putting in this money, and then what do you get if you don't make any ticket sales back and you don't get nominated for any awards? It's tough. So we wanted to at least offer a very valuable prize in my eyes. And the prize that we're offering this year is called the Viral Award. And what that means is we're going to go see all of the musicals, and we're looking for the best song that we could turn into a kick-ass music video. And we will fully fund it and create a beautiful video that they can put on their channel, and we'll put on ours as well. That's kind of our end of it.
That's great. So you're essentially giving back to the community of musical theater writers at Hollywood Fringe.
It's what I'd like to do, and also kind of expand our brand, because I don't want our brand at the end of the day to be just my music. I would love if we had other creatives involved, because the idea is for the love of parody. It's not Laura Wiley writes parody. It's people that love writing music. So we want to find something that, works with our brand and something that we can have fun with.
If our listeners want to learn more about what you do or see some of your videos, where can we send them online?
So if you go to laurawileypiano.com, I actually have a few things up there. I've got my current schedule and my videos. I also have a link on there to my musical parodies. So one of the pages on my page has a bunch of our videos posted that you can watch. You can go to our YouTube channel, For the Love of Parody. That's got our full Buffy Kills Edward 19-episode web series. We also have our music on Spotify and Apple Music. We also have our Instagram page, For the Love of Parody, or mine is Laura Wiley Piano. I'm very big on keeping your brand universal throughout. So it's the same anywhere you look. The next things that will be coming out, if people do decide to follow us, our next exciting projects, we will be making the Game of Thrones music videos, which I'm very excited about. We are going to be doing I did serial killers this last year, and I wrote a musical parody of The Real World. We're going to be releasing that as a mini web series. That's going to be coming out this year. And we also are going to be doing a comedy show with our team that I mentioned before. And that's going to be kind of just more to kind of throw in things that aren't always musical and just kind of put in some comedy in our channel as well.
So even though you don't have a show this year at Hollywood Fringe, you have quite a bit going on at the same time.
I will be actually performing in a show. One of my friends is doing a one-man improvised musical, and I'll be playing piano for that. So I will probably be involved in other people's shows. I have no interest in producing again this year. It was, we did a lot last year. I can't even tell you how many promotional events. We did 4 fundraisers. We did 2 promotional events. I had buttons made. We did promo photo shoots. It was so much. We had a featured drink. We did the cabaret. We did everything. And I think whenever I do come back, if and whenever, I want to do something on a smaller scale, because I've been doing these big shows and I love them, but God, they're a lot. They're a lot to do major shows. And, when you do a big show like that, there's no chance of taking it anywhere. So like you look at the show that went to New York this year, The Day I Became Black, they're doing an 8-week run in Soho in New York. It's a one-man show with no props, no overhead, no anything, no costumes. So yeah, it's really easy to grab one guy, go take him to New York and go do an 8-week run of a show where he stands on stage and talks, and that's smart though. Like that's how you have to be thinking about theater if you want to make it relatively profitable, I think, in this changing kind of market, where everybody's trying to give away things for free. I have to kind of reevaluate, okay, how can I write things in a smaller capacity where I'm not spending as much, so I don't have to worry so hard about making ticket sales back.
Well, Laura, it has been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for giving us a chance to learn about what you do and to learn about the Hollywood Fringe scene more generally. I wish you great luck with everything you're doing this year, and we'll look forward to seeing you on stage and perhaps back at Fringe in future years.
Thank you so much for having me.
Alrighty, take care.
Bye.
This concludes our 3rd Hollywood Fringe interview. In the next episode, we will have a final chat with a Fringe participant, but I will be unavailable to return as interviewer. That role will be played by the more than capable Thos Ribbits. Until then, as Thos himself would say, goodbye.
For more information about Musical Talk, please visit our website at musicaltalk.co.uk. You can email us at feedback@musicaltalk.co.uk, listen to past episodes on iTunes and YouTube, and follow our social media channels on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.